Hey guys, welcome to another video. This is part 2 of Microtonality. So in this video, I will be talking about various temperaments. So in part 1, I started talking a little bit about temperaments, equal temperaments to be specific, and I only really got into the math involved in calculating the ratios, but I sort of got a little bit into temperaments. So a temperament, equal temperament to be specific, is a system of tuning that spaces all notes out evenly. Say in our Western 12-tone equal temperament system, magic number 12 here because we're in the West. So in 12-tone equal temperament, you have all the frequencies are spaced out evenly by a ratio of the 12th root of 2, because it's 12-tone equal temperament. And an octave has a 2-to-1 ratio. The octave is the only real pure interval in 12-tone. Because the octave is 2-to-1. Everything else is tuned evenly apart. So, say you start off at A220, you multiply by the 12th root of 2, you get B flat. You get B flat 3 as it's known, multiply by 12th root of 2, you get B3, multiply by the 12th root of 2, you get the frequency of C4, so on and so forth. So, that's our normal temperament that we use, 12 notes. You know it already. I'm sure all the music you've ever heard in your life has been in 12 tet. Now let's say we replace that 12 with a different number. The smallest viable temperament to use, I would say, is 5 tet, and even that is kind of hard to use. So 5 tet, 5-tone equal temperament, divides the octave by a ratio of the 5th root of 2. So all the frequencies are spaced out by a ratio of the 5th root of 2. So frequency F2 will have a ratio of the 5th root of 2 to the frequency F1 in 5 tet. But we don't really talk frequency too much in our microtonal circles. We talk more about a different unit. So here is some of your regular 12 tet vocabulary that you probably already know. So you have semitone equals the distance between two neighboring keys on the keyboard. Or frets on guitar. So this is your first vocab word that you probably already know. So semitone is the distance between two neighboring keys on a keyboard or between two neighboring frets on a guitar. Say you're on the E string, on any of the two E strings on the guitar. For example, the first fret is going to be F, because the open string is E. The first fret is going to be a semitone higher, so F. I'm pretty sure. I don't play guitar actually, but this is what I've heard. And of course, I do play the keyboard, so I'm much more familiar with that. Say you take B flat, the note directly to the right of that, B is a semitone away. Another vocab word that you're going to want to know is tone. 2 semitones. Makes sense, right? Semitone is, semi means half, tone, tone. So a tone is 2 semitones, or it could be called a whole tone. So say from B to C sharp is a tone. And based on that tone, that is when we start dividing the temperament. That is how we know to start dividing the temperaments. So now, I've used the green up until now. Let's switch colors too. Let's see if this black wants to work. Yep, it's working. Baruch Hashem. So this is the first vocab word that you're going to need to know for microtonality, besides microtonality, and besides for microtone itself, of course. A microtone, I already talked about that. And it's any interval smaller than a semitone, basically. So we're talking about a very specific microtone here. So a quarter tone, that is half a semitone. Makes sense, right? Because a quarter is half of a half. So that's the first, and you're only gonna need to know about quarter tones if you play it with two keyboards at once. One is tuned a quarter tone sharp, like I do sometimes, and then the other microtonality vocab word you're gonna need to know is very common is cent. 1/100th of a semitone. Darn it. Did not hope that wasn't on camera. Well, whatever. Cent. 1/100th of a semitone. So you're going to need to know all that. So those are your vocabulary words you're going to need to know. So now that we're talking about cents, it's going to be so much easier now that you know what a cent is. Because I am not interested in having my calculator out every time I'm doing one of these videos to calculate all these frequency ratios. It's going to be so much easier now that you know cents. So now for 5-tone equal temperament, 5-tet. So in 5, wonder what's going on with this marker here. Whatever. So 5-tet, you divide 1 octave is 12 semitones. You do the math. 12 times 100. What's that? So that's 1200, of course. So you're gonna divide the octave of 1200 cents by 5. So 1200 divided by 5 is 240, of course. So each step in 5-tet is 240 cents apart. So from your root note, going in 5-tet, you're gonna have 0, 2. So the cent values from your root note are 0, 240, 480, 720, 960, and 1200, which is, of course, an octave. So that's 5-tet for you. Anything below 5-tet, I consider unusable just because the gaps are so large. In any event, you have nearly a sub minor third gap between each interval here, so sub minor third, basically, it's an interval that is in between a major second and a minor third. So let's see. Let's say we start on C. We're going to try to use 48-tet notation because 48-tet notation is most convenient for me. You can notate eighth tones like that. Because, of course, if you have semitones are available in 12-tet, quarter tones in 24-tet, and 24 times 2 is 48, so there's double as many notes. So each note is based a half a quarter tone or an eighth tone apart. So let me just introduce you to some 48-tet notation here, shall we? Shall I introduce you to... I will introduce you to some 48-tet notation in just a moment. Say you're doing a 5-tet scale starting on C. You have C, then what's 240 cents from C? That would be C, C sharp, D, then pretty much, and then that 240 rounded to the nearest 25 is 250. So that would be D half sharp. 480. That rounded to the nearest 25 is 475. So you're going to want to use F quarter flat. So that's going to be your first bit of 48-tet notation. I'll show you the whiteboard in a little bit. 7/20 cent. That rounds to 7/25 when you round to the nearest 25. So G 1/4 sharp. 960 rounds to the nearest 25 is 950. So that'll be A half sharp. And then the octave is, of course, C. So here's 48-tet notation for you. This little natural symbol with the arrow below it means that it is a quarter flat. If it has the arrow above it, it is a quarter sharp. I'll show you a bit more 48-tet notation in just a moment. First, I'm gonna show you this one more time. Just looking at the note names without looking at the accidentals. Do you spot any resemblance to a specific pentatonic scale here? Because I do. That closely resembles a Mixolydian pentatonic. Sorry, I don't have my keyboard out, so I won't be able to play that for you now. But that doesn't really matter because I can't really replicate a 5-tet scale on my keyboard. Doesn't matter, can't replicate a 5-tet scale on my keyboard anyway. Because my keyboard is 12-tet and it doesn't have any tuning options. So I can't really replicate 5-tet. But you want to see some real 48-tet notation? Well, there's no real agreed upon notation for 48-tet, but these are all the notes between C and C sharp and 48-tet. Or should I, actually no, let's do all the notes between C and D and 48-tet. You got C, C 1/4 sharp, C half sharp, D flat and a quarter. I like to notate it D flat and a quarter. D flat, which is enharmonically equivalent to C sharp. Then you have D 3/4 flat is the flat with the arrow above it. Then you have D half flat, just like that. D 1/4 flat. D natural. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, there's 8 tones there. 8 different notes there. And if you want, I could write the cent values below that. So we could have 0, 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175, 200. So here are your cent values for these notes. But yeah, that's some 48-tet notation for you. Now let's just quickly talk about a few other temperaments. I already started talking about 24-tone equal temperament. That is basically 12-tone equal temperament, but you throw in extra notes in between each note of 12-tet. 48-tet, you take 24-tet and throw extra notes between each note again. So I showed you some 48-tet notation just now. There are a few other temperaments out there. 31-tet and 53-tet are some common ones. And there's also some less common ones that don't get, I would say they probably don't get as much usage because they are kind of hard to work with. Like, say, anything smaller, like any temperament that is less than 5-tet, like 4-tet, 3-tet, 2-tet. Those are probably very hard to work with because, and I didn't even bother talking about them in depth because those are all subsets of 12-tet. 6-tet probably doesn't get as much usage. Either it's just basically a whole tone scale. 6-tet, whole tone scale, yeah. 7-tet has a pretty close approximation to the 5th, so it's fine. But 8-tet probably doesn't get a whole lot of usage because its 5th is 750 cent, which is a whole 50 cent wider than a perfect 5th in 12-tet. So that would explain why I've never heard of 8-tet being used ever. But that's it for me in this video. I hope you really enjoyed this. I really hope you enjoyed. And yes, I'll catch you in the next one. and may we see each other in Yerushalayim with Mashiach Sekenu, B'mihira V'yameinu.